It's time for the Rose Chat Podcast, a podcast dedicated to celebrating the world's most beloved flower, the rose. Join award-winning gardeners Chris VanCleave and Teresa Byington as they chat with rose lovers and experts from around the globe. With each episode, you'll gain valuable knowledge and insights to achieve the rose garden you've always dreamed of. Listen now as we explore the world of roses.
Hey friends, thanks for joining us today. With me is Matt Douglas of High Country Roses, and today it's all about miniature roses. And Matt is the perfect person to talk about this subject, as this is a story that actually weaves through his family. Hey Matt, welcome back to Rose Chat.
Hi, Teresa. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you so much. I've been listening to Rose Chat a lot this summer, and you have had some great guests this year.
Oh, I've been very fortunate. We've had some good ones, and it's great. It's great. It's so fun. And we have the rose world is just so diverse. There's just so many great people.
I also love that Instagram because I get to see how your yard is doing, and I see you're one of our favorite mutual roses, Ghislaine de Feligon, is still looking really good on your potting shed.
Yes, I have several of the Ghislaine de Feligons now. I've got them just creeping up all kinds of walls and trellises and things. I love that rose. It's a good one.
It is a beauty.
It is a good one. I love those roses that don't seem to matter if it's hot outside, which it has been so hot. But are you having the heat out there too?
Oh, it's finally cooled off this week, which is nice. Trust me, I'll take it. But yeah, the last couple of weeks, very hot and dry as it typically is here in Colorado. But it's a nice right now. We're happy. Good growing weather around here, finally.
Oh, good. Well, I think we have cool weather coming as well, so we can't wait. We've been cooked. We've been totally cooked. So on to the roses. How did you get involved in miniature roses?
Well, like you mentioned, they've been in my family for so long. I really was excited because, you and I talk about these topics early in the year, and then I kind of go out and do a little research. And so I really took this year as a good opportunity to kind of dig in and really get my story straight on miniature roses. So I was able this year. I got into some of Ralph Moore's writings, a study of moths and miniature roses and those miniature roses. He was really kind of a prolific writer as well as nurseryman. And man, Paul Barden has done such a great job preserving that stuff. He really deserves credit for that. I was so great to find it, and talk to some of the breeders that we work with, like Robert Ripito and Bill DeVore, who's with Greenheart Farms and Star Roses and used to run Norris Minis. And then I even learned Christian Bedard from Weeks Roses actually got his start by radiating roses with gamma rays, miniature roses with gamma rays to induce mutations. So it seems like everybody's got a little bit of an interest in miniature roses, and everybody's worked with them a little bit along the way in their career.
Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned Ralph, and I know that he was the father of the miniature rose.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. And his writings reflect that. He's got some just great in-depth things. And yeah, I would encourage people just to even search a couple of his writings if you want to dig in a little deeper. So I really came into miniature roses though through my mother when I was a kid. I didn't even know it at the time, but my mother was a grand aficionado of the miniature rose. And so my mother was Linda Campbell was her name, and she was a diehard in rose circles, both on the sort of local and national American Rose Society levels, and just took a liking. She fell in love with this sort of smaller stature of the plants and just how easily she could work them into the landscape and things. but she was also really drawn by just the ease of growth and the hardiness and the disease
Mhm.
resistance, those sorts of things, which were a little more challenging back in the 80s and when she was growing them. So she really fell in love with miniature roses, and she grew them in her own garden, worked them in with some of the other hybrid teas and floribundas that she was growing, and really found a place exhibiting them. Loved exhibiting them, and was instrumental in getting them into miniature roses into some of our local public gardens here. Our War Memorial Garden has a huge collection of miniature roses, and then ARS test gardens too. We had them in Denver back in the day. So she really became a champion for miniature roses, and then. I always love to tell the story of her walking around the ARS convention with her button on that says "Equal Rights for Miniatures." So, which that slogan maybe hit a little harder in the early '80s, but it's indicative of kind of the way she thought of these little plants, and just really thought they were really had a place in everybody's garden.
Ab-
So.
Absolutely. And I think of that now as we look back, and there were many years after that where miniatures had their own convention in the American Rose Society. So, she did good work.
That's the truth. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. She would get a bee in her bonnet, or get something she was really in love with, and man, she would get behind it. That's for sure. One of the great things that it enabled her to do, though, was she became very fast friends with Ralph Moore, and she and Ralph really is the godfather of the miniature rose. I think he's got on order of, like, I think at last there's about 300 varieties of roses that are in commerce currently that are his genetics. And I read in some of my research that some people think as much as 75% of the miniature roses in commerce have got at least some of the genetics developed by Ralph.
Oh.
So he was an interesting guy, and he and my mother became fast friends, and ultimately he named a rose after her, which interestingly was a hybrid rugosa rose, so not a mini that they both loved, but a very interesting landscape shrub, hybrid rugosa, and a great rose in its own right. So.
One of the things in my research about Ralph, and a very interesting guy, was that how he came to roses. And having done the podcast for so many years, I usually ask people, "How did you come to roses?" And so often it's a grandparent, and Ralph was no exception. His
Mhm.
background was that his grandparents grew roses, and that's what he was drawn to. So I loved that part of the story. And then your family has so much rich history, and you talk in one of your articles about the Linda Campbell rose became in your family Grandma's rose. I just
Mhm.
love that.
Yeah, definitely. So so it's always, it's been an important part of our family and our nursery's history, and all those things together. So, and interestingly enough, my mother is how a lot of the miniature roses got introduced into High Country Roses,
Mhm.
sort of roster of roses, because when she married Dr. Campbell is the founder of High Country Roses in 1970. But she and Dr. Campbell fell in love in the 80s and married, and along with my mother, the roses made their way into the nursery, and they've never left. So we have that to thank as well.
Well, that now High Country was originally Old Garden roses, so that was
Correct.
so that was great to bring those into.
Yeah, it brought a little diversity to the offering,
Mhm.
that's for sure. And, it's really been an important part of our offering, ever since those days. Miniature roses have kind of gone up and down in terms of popularity. And, like you mentioned, they had their own convention, ARS convention for a little while, in the 80s and 90s and even into the 2000s. They were like very, very popular. You would find them just about anywhere. And then, towards, the late 2000s into the 2010s, their popularity really, really waned significantly
Mhm.
with, the advent a lot of the knockout roses and easy care shrubs. Honestly, a lot of nurseries stopped, really producing them and really working on them at the with the same sort of vigor that they used to. So they waned a bit there. But they've made a bit of a comeback now in the 2020s, and in particular to us, we've really made a point out of expanding our collection as opposed to kind of getting rid of them, and that includes collecting older roses. Just this year I had a wonderful opportunity. One of our local Rosarians, Gwen Caladice, she actually operated a nursery for a short time called Gwen's Minis, but she had, literally hundreds of Ralph Moore roses that had not, really seen propagation in several years. And we were able to get in and identify
Mm.
well, she was moving from her home, so she was ready to
Mhm.
get rid of them and get them to a good home. So we were able to get in on her property there and identify and save about 30 different varieties. Um, from the developers that are coming in, and what, they don't care too much about, you know historic roses
No.
necessarily as opposed to the property. But so that was great. And we we're always on the lookout for new minis, anytime we have the opportunity. We've had some real reliable partners, and weeks tends to bring out at least one miniature rose a year, it feels like. Star roses, gosh, they've just had such great results with the Sunblaze collection, and they seems like they're introducing one or two a year. Then on top of that, we work with some smaller breeders like SUNY Bolar, just brought Rosarian Tom Mayhew to us last year, and Robert Ripito, he's got so many fun little minis. Kay Lindo is one of my favorite little roses. It's so adorable. And then, of course, our friend David Zlezak has done quite a bit
Mhm.
with minis of
Yes.
recent.
Yes. Now, let's talk a little bit about their growth habit. Are minis really mini? Are they really miniatures?
Yeah. So the big question is, so what is a miniature rose, right? So I in researching, I actually found from Ralph a great quote that I'm just going to read for you, because I feel like it's really, it explains a lot, exactly what we're doing, but also kind of his outlook. So what he says is, the dictionary offers a beginning when it says, in defining the word miniature, a representation of a much reduced scale, a small copy. As I see it, that is exactly what we mean when we say miniature rose. A real rose, but one that exists in a small or reduced size as compared with a large or medium sized rose. A miniature may be a conglomeration, yet very orderly, of many characteristics, miniature and otherwise, since nearly all miniature roses are of a very mixed ancestry. So, and we'll talk about that a little bit more, but one of the most interesting things that I really learned in digging in on Ralph's writings is just all of the corners of the rose world that he brought and used in his hybridizing of miniature roses. It's very, very interesting.
Mhm.
So, miniature roses are their own modern rose class, which means that category of roses was developed in the modern period after 1867. So they are their own category of roses. Technically, what they are compact shrub roses with a smaller stature and flower. So typically miniature roses, and the category has gotten broader with time. But typically when we think of miniature roses, we're thinking of 1 or 2 feet wide by maybe 1 or 2 feet tall. And roses, think more, size of a quarter to the size of a nickel, and smaller for sure. But we're thinking smaller blooms and smaller plants. The category, like I said, has become very diverse, and we have garden and patio plants, roses that are specifically grown as show minis, like literal miniature hybrid tea form that people enjoy taking to the rose show. Ground cover roses. Many of those roses owe their roots to miniature roses. And then, its own category has popped up with mini flora roses, which are just really kind of the minis that are on the larger end of the scale. And they typically have a little bit more of a traditional, it's funny you say traditional, but like a high centered look. So minis, they're great plants, that's for sure. Well, let's talk about the history of the miniature rose a little bit. So miniature roses were originally discovered as species roses growing on the island of Mauritius in the Indian Ocean as early as the 1800s. So these plants, again, naturally occurring, but had that small stature. There's talk some of these plants would only get a few inches tall. Blooms were literally maybe a quarter of an inch big. And as those plants were collected, several of them made their way to Europe, either by seed or cutting or just, sort of transplanting of the plants. And really, the story of miniature roses comes into sort of fruition in Switzerland around 1918. So what was rediscovered then was what they came to be known as the Swiss fairy rose, which legend had it was growing in a pot for about 100 years in this location in Switzerland, and was thought to have been one of the roses that was imported from Mauritius. So that rose became known as Rosa roulettii and ended up introduced into commerce from that point. Well, obviously, it's something that's new. It's something that hadn't been seen. And it became quite popular in Europe and quickly drew the eye of it was a period where there was a lot going on with rose breeding and hybridizing. And as these miniature roses sort of fan their way across Europe, many of the breeders started working with them to see if they could, develop additional miniature roses. And really, the first mini of consequence was a rose developed by Jan de Vink, who is a Dutch breeder who crossed the roulettii with a rose called Gloria Mundii, which is a polyantha rose. And they produced this little tiny plant that bloomed with red flowers and a white eye, and he named it Peon. Not a great selling name, I will say. And the American Rosarian, Robert Pyle, who was of Conrad Pyle fame, kind of spotted it, brought it to the United States, and quickly renamed it Tom Thumb, which I will give him credit. That is a much more commercial name.
It's improved.
Yeah. So the wonderful thing about Tom Thumb, though, was, by fortune, it was a very prolific, prodigious stud rose. So one of the problems with miniature roses and in breeding miniature roses is there's an incredible difficulty because a lot of the characteristics are associated with sterility. So not a lot of miniature roses produce hips. So as we'll talk about a little later, that's a lot of the reason why Ralph Moore ended up using so many different types of roses. You would think you get into miniature roses, you just cross a miniature with a miniature, but that's really not the story at all. So it was really quite fortunate that this rose, Tom Thumb, was so prodigious because it really allowed people to use that pollen and develop new miniature roses. And all of the sort of big breeders really got their fingers in. Pedro Dot of Spain, the Mayon, all of them, really took a little turn at developing miniature roses. Tantu in Germany, all of them early adopters. Even J&P here in those folks in the United States really took a crack early. So as that focus started to shift to the U.S., then we kind of run into Ralph. To be honest, he was that early as an early adopter and hybridizer of miniature roses. So Ralph was born and spent his entire life in Visalia, California, and that would be the home of his nurseries, Sequoia Nurseries. He kind of grew up, like you had mentioned, with his grandparents and his parents in agriculture, be it either in the nursery or growing vegetables or whatever it was. And he studied at UC Davis and just kind of got a good feel for his theory of hybridizing and just kind of how he got in to developing roses. And I found this great quote from him, another one that just kind of describes his life's work. And he says, "My own work with miniature roses spans a period of more than 25 years." And just as an aside, it was a lot more than 25 years. That was when he wrote this. So I believe he lived to 102 years old and was still working in his nursery at the time of his death. So, but back to his quote, "It involves the use of many types of roses, varieties of roses, including at least 5 species, hybrid teas, polyanthas, floribundas, tea roses, and a number of his own seedlings and hybrids." So what typically would happen with Ralph's process for hybridizing was he would find finally miniature roses that would produce pollen. And then he would combine that with a different mother plant, whether it was a floribunda or a hybrid tea, or even a climbing rose, or whatever rose had the characteristics he was looking for. But he would add that miniature pollen as the male parent to the hybridizing process. And then that kind of changed a lot of the way people looked at hybridizing, in particular miniature roses. And his roses, are some of the just icons that we carry and should be in like every garden in America. Some of his roses include Cupcake, Sweet Chariot, Rise and Shine. One of the most interesting miniatures I have is a rose called Scarlet Moss, which is a miniature moss rose. Charlie Brown, which is one of those first striped miniature roses. Cal Poly, Beauty Secret. Even Cinderella, which was really, really early on and is one of the very first micro minis. I bet you grow a few of those in your yard, don't you?
Well, for many years I grew Cupcake and Mini Pearl. I don't have them now, but they were fabulous. Mini Pearl was fabulous. Let's see. I've grown several of them.
Well, they are just phenomenal roses, and I just keep collecting them because they're healthy. They bloom a bunch. I like obviously the idea of keeping Ralph's roses in commerce. So in addition to all these classic miniatures, there's been some great advances in hybridizing with some of the modern efforts. And in preparing this, I was able to talk to a few people about really some of the qualities they're looking for, some of their feeling on the industry as a whole and those sorts of things. So one of the people I talked to was Christian Bedard from Weeks. He really loves miniature roses. Like I mentioned, his career started trying to mutate miniature roses. So it's got a special place in his heart, even as minis have kind of taken a little bit less of their business model. It's still an important part of their business model. And what he really said, what he's looking for in his modern hybridizing of minis is a good, balanced, compact plant. So one of the interesting things with the Weeks miniature roses is I have noticed a few of their miniature roses have really been larger plants than we typically think of. And he did say in our conversations that what is more important to him is that balance and that compact growth habit. It's not so much just putting a number on it and being like, mini roses can only be 1.5 feet tall. It's really just that sort of compact nature in combination with the other characteristics he's looking for. Not shockingly, his work with Weeks is involved a lot of work into really bringing strong disease resistance into these roses. And the other thing that's really just kind of been more of a market reaction of recent is he's really been trying to bring more of an English style bloom to their miniature breeding. And I think that's evident, especially in some of his roses like Edith's Darling, which is, again, maybe we typically list that as a shrub, but he considers it to be a miniature. It's really in that sort of tweener area, but it's got a very flat bloom that's packed with petals. And he said he's really excited about Easy Charmer, which they're just releasing this year, which again has that sort of flat and petal packed bloom along with those other characteristics that they're looking for. I also was able to chat a little bit with Bill DeVore, and Bill grows for Star Roses. And like I had mentioned, he's got a huge history with miniature roses. And what he really emphasizes is versatility. So they have this wondrously successful Sunblaze collection, and I love it as a nurseryman because I just trust it coming in. I don't have to test and worry over these plants. They're all strong growers. They're all great bloomers, and he's absolutely right, because you can do so many things with their roses. They typically, their miniature roses have been more in that sort of traditional size, so they haven't gone like with much bigger. But year in and year out, they have really brought a lot of those, disease resistant, ultra blooming roses to bear.
So many pretty ones.
Yeah. Oh, they absolutely. They just really have got some outstanding genetics, and it's their goal to just kind of build off of that really, really strong base. So, and even some of our smaller growers like Robert Ripito, he is very excited because a lot of his roses are getting trialed again by some of these bigger growers, which is just a testament to their rising popularity. Even our good old friend David Zlezak, I mean, he's got a recent Award of Merit winner or Award of Excellence winner, and gosh, some of his minis, they're all so very, very hardy. But man, we sold out of those things so quick this year. It was great.
He's done great things. It's amazing how many he has. I've seen the list, and it's like, oh my goodness, I forgot about that one. I forgot about that one.
Yeah, he's sneaky like that. He's always got good stuff.
He does. So I'm assuming that you're putting these in your garden as well.
Oh, you know it. Yeah. I mean, my mother would be very upset with me. We do call it Grandma's garden in the backyard where we put all the minis. But yeah, I love growing miniature roses. And, some of the words we've used already, like versatility, and just like you can use them in so many different ways in your yard. I will describe for you my yard, which is a little bit unique. So my mother-in-law was living with us and sick, and so we had a little area where she would come out and sit on the patio. So I wanted to
Mm.
put this area under a tree, and it was just a great spot for her to sit. So what we did was I built this bed that was no more than, maybe 4 feet long by maybe 3 feet across. So not a great deal of space. But what I did was I packed 50 miniature roses in there. So they're literally growing on top of each other. And I get it. That's not everybody's aesthetic, but she loved it.
Mhm.
And it's actually really proven to be a great way for me to grow roses in a real compact area. Now, certainly you don't have to go that dense, but a sea of roses is not everybody's thing for sure. But the nice thing about miniature roses is it can be if you do want to do
Yes.
something like that. Miniature roses are great as accent pieces. They fit perfectly like on the edges of gardens and give depth to some of your larger rose bushes. They can be used, like I was doing as a standalone planting. Many people grow them for exhibiting. They're great as container roses. There's even some miniature roses that'll trail a little bit if you wanted to do a hanging basket. That was actually one of the things Ralph worked on quite a bit. In particular, the rose
Mhm.
sweet chariot will do that a little bit. They'll sprawl a little bit. You'll see that. It's also kind of the genetics that lead towards ground cover roses and things like that coming through with some of those miniatures. So I love miniature roses because they're tough. I don't do any winter protecting. I never worry about disease with them. I know in some tougher locations you may get some fungal issues here and there, but honestly, here where it's dry, I overhead water them, and honestly, I don't have mildew, I don't have black spot. It's they're just great little plants. And honestly, I prune them hard. When they're growing into each other, I just cut them hard, and they come back, and you can kind of shape them almost. You get a rose like popcorn or something like that. You can almost shape it like it's a topiary or something.
I have
But,
popcorn. It's such a pretty little rose. It's
I
just
know, I
popcorn,
know.
it just sounds a little, funny, but it is a beautiful little
I was
rose.
thinking it looks a little bit like a chia plant, but
It's pretty. I love it. I love it.
it
So
is
tell
a
us
fun one.
about, I'm assuming you have a lot of miniatures available at High Country.
Oh yes, yes. So we've grown the category. So at the current moment, we're growing about 87 varieties. So
Oh.
right around a tenth of our total inventory, and so that number will continue to grow. Like I said, we saved about 30 varieties this year, which will we got to kind of take them through a process of getting them built up and making sure they're disease free and those sorts of things. But over the next few years, we'll introduce probably another 30 varieties of miniature rose, I would hope. So that's exciting. And yeah, I always love miniature roses. I'm not afraid of them. They are a little less expensive. You pay a little bit less for them, and that has kind of scared some people off or make it feel like it's not quite worthwhile. But I always say nobody ever grows just one miniature rose. When you're buying miniature roses, you should get at least two or three.
I'm on your website now and I'm looking. You have a beautiful collection. A beautiful.
Yeah, thank you.
You've got
It
miniature
is
on
one of those
there.
areas that I really take a personal involvement in the collection process. I really do. Whether it's my mother's voice speaking to me over
Mhm.
these years, or whether it's just my personal affinity for them, I really do enjoy collecting them, and I like having them available to the public.
Nice work. Nice work. So tell us what is going on this time of year out at High Country.
Oh, just sitting around twiddling our thumbs. No. The summer, the summer is a wonderful time. July is actually one of our slowest months. It's actually our second slowest month of the year behind November, believe it or not. So,
Mm.
I think everything just gets hot and, everybody's kind of tired of working in their yards. So it happens to work out wonderfully for us because we're, in the midst of propagating roses to our little heart's content. So right at the moment, I believe we've got about 40,000 cuttings going right at the moment, and we'll top that out probably somewhere around 60,000 to produce our roses for next year. And that's obviously not just miniature roses, but that's across the board. So we're hard at work getting ready for growing roses. That's for sure.
Well, you grow them well. Hey, tell us which ones were flying off the shelves this year?
Well, as the minis go, it's what's old is new is what I always say. So a
Mhm.
few of my favorites, um, you know, uh, Jeannie LaJoy is
Mhm.
always
Oh, that's
one of our
beautiful.
top selling miniature roses. And I always say with Jeannie LaJoy, and it is Jeannie LaJoy, named after a very lovely woman in Texas, um, uh, is that rose very well could be my favorite miniature rose and my favorite climbing rose. And it's just such a wonderful, cheerful sort of mid-size climbing miniature. Um, and I always say mid-size, and then somebody inevitably sends me a picture of one that's like 10 to 12 feet tall. But typically, I think of it in that 6 to 8 foot range, and just absolutely covered in quarter-sized pink blooms. And so that one year in and year out is always up there. Sweet Chariot, Ralph's Rose Sweet Chariot. That's one that we grow as many, or we sell as many as we grow every year, and
Mhm.
so people just seem to love that thing, and it's got a nice fragrance to it. It's one of those miniatures, and then, we definitely have seen an uptick in the Sunblaze roses. Rainbow Sunblaze, Mandarin Sunblaze. Those two are huge performers for us, and then we see quite a few of Christian's roses too, like Life's Little Pleasures. That has just been an absolute gem, um, of a mini, and one of his newer ones, Midnight Fire. Man,
Ooh, I'm looking at that one.
it's just got such
Beautiful.
fantastic color.
That's
It's
gorgeous.
one of the few there. Oh, and of course, Diamond Eyes. That's another one of Christian's that we just can't seem to keep in stock.
So, thinking about in stock, are you going to have your fall sale?
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
You got to
So
get ready for that.
we were working on a little bit of so we took all of our overstock propagation last year and held it over in a cold frame greenhouse for the first time ever, just to sort of see what would happen. And I don't know why I was surprised, but we had fantastic results. So
Good.
a lot of those cuttings were held in plug, and then we potted them up this spring so that we would specifically have a little bit of stock to add this fall. So yeah, so the answer is yes. So we're going to restock probably 30 to 40 varieties, some pretty popular ones too here coming up towards the end of August. And then, yes, we're going to definitely have a fall sale, probably starting September 15th. I say probably because we're also in the middle of developing a new and improved website, which I know a number of your listeners and my customers will be very happy to hear about. So the update is a lot of it is the inner workings of things. So I know people have from time to time had difficulty logging in and getting
Yeah.
into their accounts. Well, we are very hopeful that this will solve all of those type problems. So yeah, so we're looking forward to that. Fall is always an exciting time in the greenhouse, and we're always happy to talk roses. That's for sure.
Absolutely. Now, for our new listeners, tell a little bit about the roses that you ship out. Tell us, the size, that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. We're a mail order nursery. So what we produce are roses in quart size, 5-inch pots. So it's a 5 by 5 inch square pot. And depending on the variety and the time of year and things, those plants are usually right about a foot tall when we send them out. So they're a start for sure. I always say everything I send out of there, I intend to go and base our warranty like it's going straight in the ground. But some people do like to grow them out into pots for a bit and then get them into their ground. But it's a start, and we found it to be a very good size, especially for shipping, keeping those costs down, and then success once those plants are in your yard. And then we guarantee those plants for a full year. So if there is any difficulty with them, you just give me a call, and we're happy to get things straightened out for you.
Well, I'm one of those people who does not pot them up. I get them in the ground, except for this year. This year, I think I ordered, I don't know how many. I ordered a bunch, 4 or 5 at least, that I put in a raised bed. They're huge. They're absolutely huge. You would have no thought that they started this year in a 4-inch pot. They're huge. Actually, one of them, I had another rose that I bought full size. I don't know, through a rose sale or something. And this one is more vigorous that I got from you than that one. So,
it's an
don't be
active
worried about the
growing
4-inch
time.
pot for sure. They're doing
I
great.
don't doubt it for a second. Yeah, it's a very active growing stage for a lot of roses, and
Yes.
so it is a great size to get in and get going.
Well, Matt, it's always wonderful to have you and to get caught up on all the great things happening out there in Colorado.
Well, absolutely. I'm so happy to do it, and thanks for having me back. I mean, good grief, what is it now? Like 4 or 5 times we've done this? It's fun every year.
We don't take it lightly, all the work that you do. You're bringing so many things back for us, and keeping them out there in great in your great greenhouses are just filled with new things and bringing old things back, and this miniature collection. So it's not a little thing that you do, and we're very appreciative.
Well, it's my pleasure. Truly, I love roses. It's been, it took a little while for me to figure that out. When I was a teenager, you didn't necessarily think it was that much fun, but at my age now, I can truly say that it is a love and a passion of mine, and I just love getting these plants out and in people's gardens, and
Yes.
just seeing that just fruition of roses and life it's really edifying for me.
Well, I'm sure your mom is very proud.
Well, I would hope so. Yeah. I'm sure she is.
Well done. She'll be saying, well done, well done.
Indeed.
Well, friends, we're so glad you could join us today, too. And if you're interested in taking a look at some of the beautiful roses we talked about today, just hop over to highcountryroses.com. Friends, until next time, happy gardening.
You've been listening to the Rose Chat Podcast with Chris VanCleave and Teresa Byington, expert rose gardeners who want to help you achieve the rose garden of your dreams. Don't miss an episode. Listen anytime on our website at rosechatpodcast.com or listen on the go via the Rose Chat app on iTunes and Stitcher Radio. Share this podcast with your social networks and join us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram by using the hashtag RoseChat. Join us next time for another edition of the Rose Chat Podcast. The Rose Chat Podcast is a production of the Rose Chat Media Group, Birmingham, Alabama.